So like a couple years ago, my wife and I go to this grill for our anniversary, and we had a gift card and we were excited to go down. We had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. We'd never been there before, but we go and we're inside, and this place, I felt like it was a place where everybody knew your name. And I do say that on purpose. It felt like Cheers. It was a funny environment, but I gotta be honest, the service at this place was top notch. Like the perfect balance of frequency on how they were at our tables and their niceness and their friendliness. And also like, they just never really overdid it either. And then on top of that, the food was incredible. Like this place was awesome. If it was a place we could afford to go to regularly, we would probably go there all the time. I remember then a couple days later, I met with a guy at a local diner, and this diner is like pretty much right around the corner from this place. And we were just sitting down to get breakfast, and this place was terrible. Like the food was fine, don't get me wrong. My hash browns were cooked to the right crispiness and all that kind of stuff. But though I felt like I was intruding on them by showing up. Like I walked into this diner and like the people that like ran it like looked at me like, like what are you doing here? And it was just awkward. And the service was like throwing the plates down in front of you, and it just felt weird. And even though I probably spent over $100 at the nice grill and I probably spent like $650 at the diner, I would probably go back to the grill far more often than I would to the diner, even though I can't afford it. Like, why? Because the service and the attitude behind those experiences drastically changes what it is that they're actually offering. When we think about missions, there's a lot of things that we could put on paper and say, this is what you do, and this is what you do, and this is what we have to do, and you need to say these kind of things. But if we don't have the right attitude, then we're going to find ourselves in big trouble. So I want to walk through 6 biblical principles, 6 attitudes really, that we need to really have in the back of our mind and right in the middle of our hearts as we go and we do missions together. So I want to first look at this concept from Ephesians 4, where we're going to try to understand our commitment to teamwork in ministry. So Ephesians 4 verse 1 says, as a prisoner for the Lord then, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you've received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. This is that life that we're asked to live that's worthy of the calling, that we would interact with one another with this humility, this patience, this love. But then it continues on and it says, make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There's one body, one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. Can you get the theme here that Paul's really mentioning here, that unity and the oneness of being together is incredibly important? When we go on a missions team, that needs to be our focus. We are one together. Our personal identity and our personal agenda of what we want to experience needs to take a back seat to the agenda and the experience of the team. I know in our culture we have these we have this tendency to uplift superheroes, or we exalt politicians, or there are sports stars, and we always want to know who the MVP was and who's the most important player, and we want to idealize pop stars and like, oh, that's that one singer that I like so much, but we'll forget about the rest of the team or the rest of what's going on, or the other people that make the music amazing, because we focus on the one individual. And when it comes to missions, we can't do any of that unless, of course, the hero is Jesus. As the scripture says that he is the head of the body, we are the body. If we're going to point to the head, let's do that all day long. But if we're trying to insert ourselves as somehow more important to the team, then we have to do that. Our commitment has to be to teamwork in ministry. The second principle we need to make sure we have is that ministry is a byproduct of the Christian life. In John 13, Jesus challenges us that by this, everyone will know that you're my disciples if you love one another. That our genuine life lived together, that our genuine life pursued of Jesus, that as we do these things now, as we serve and as we minister to others, that becomes a byproduct of what's already inside us, that we would make sure that we're pursuing a vibrant spiritual life, that we have our own personal study, that we're trying to learn from the Lord, that we're connecting and being challenged by other believers, and that we're regularly serving. And then as God continues to transform us, then this is something that we can spread to others. So as we go into a missions field, it's very important that the ministry that you do is a byproduct of your relationship with Jesus. So make sure that that's at the top of your list in preparation as well. The third thing that I think is really important here that I want to talk about is the need to maximize God's glory, to maximize His awesomeness over maxing out our gifts. Sometimes when we go on a trip, we can start to think about all the things that I bring to the table. If you're a medical professional, you can't wait to get your hands involved and start to diagnose and work with and help people. If you have a construction background, you're like, let's get to work, let's start doing all these things. And you start to define the win of the missions trip as what your involvement and how busy and how much work you get to do. And that's a natural thing. I totally understand that. But if that somehow outweighs the glory that God gets in the team and the glory that God gets in missions, then we're messing things up. You see, when we leave a field, when we come back from a team or we come off as a missionary, Jesus is the one that's still there doing the work. The church overall is the one that's still there doing the work. Our 1 week or 2 weeks or even 5 years plus, that is a short amount of time in the overall progress of what God is doing in the minds and hearts of those people. So we really need to make sure that we're maximizing God and kind of underassuming our own personal gifts as much as God does want to use those. It's God first, others then, and then ourselves last. The next principle is we want to make sure that we see the world as God sees it. And so in Mark 10:45, Jesus says, "For even as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give His life as a ransom for many." Two very consistent themes in Scripture are the idea of respect and service. It's not about receiving them, it's about offering them and giving them to others. And so even in Ephesians 6, we're challenged to serve wholeheartedly as if we were serving the Lord, not people, as if we were serving Jesus personally. Everything about a missions experience is about service. It's about pouring ourselves out, giving of ourselves as much as we possibly can. And we need to make sure that that is the forefront. So we don't go into a mission field and we want to be like, well, I need to make sure I have my R&R time, and I want to make sure that I have some time to, reflect and get down. Like, we might build some of that in, don't get me wrong. But the trip, we cannot go in with a mindset that it's about us. The trip is about service. It's about pursuing Jesus and serving the people that He loves. If we put that first, then we might be surprised at what God does in us and for us. But we have to put service absolutely 100% at the forefront. The next principle is that we need to be spiritually prepared. And while I already talked about the fact that we need to make sure that our lives are vibrant in our pursuit of Jesus, I think about the story where Jesus calmed the storm while they were on the lake together, traveling across to get to the other side. And then as they get to the other side, Jesus heals a demon-possessed man. This man has multiple demons inside of him. They called it legion. And then Jesus actually heals the possessed man and sends these demons into pigs. And that's, go read the story yourself. It's fantastic in Luke 8. But I think about what this story would be like if Jesus wasn't in the story. We'd see these guys freaking out in the storm on the lake, and they're just absolutely like going bonkers and screaming at each other, trying to bail out the water. And if they would have all survived, they'd probably be, crawling hands in the sand across the beach and going, oh my gosh, what did we just experience? Finally dry land, and they're kissing the sand and stuff. And then they see this guy who's going absolutely nuts, and he's ripping chains, and he's, being absolutely belligerent because he's possessed. And you can just imagine these disciples just kind of walking and trying to avoid him completely, and eventually just going off into the town that they want to. Like, that story wouldn't have been written. It would have been that bland. It would have been that simple. It would have been that pointless. But because Jesus was in that story, we see some incredible things happen, and we see Jesus calm the storm. We see Jesus calm and heal the possessed man. We see some incredible things happen because Jesus is there. So as a team, the things that we do, the things that we plan, the work that we try to accomplish, Jesus needs to be at the center. If we're building something, how can we have conversations about Jesus with the people we're building with? If we're actually doing a vacation Bible school, let's make sure that we're not just teaching about, love one another and make sure that you're doing good things with your parents, but it's also like pursue Jesus. And how much does Jesus love you, and how much can you know and come to love God too? So Jesus has to be at the center. Jesus is the story. It's the message and hope of Him that we're trying to spread in the first place. And then the last principle can be the most challenging one, but it's incredibly important, and it's that we would learn to embrace adversity. Romans 8:28 says, we know in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who've been called according to His purpose. And we need to realize that there are going to be things that happen on a missions trip every time that don't go according to plan. It's the way that it works. We're going into a different culture, a different society. We're only going to be there for a week. Lots of people are involved. Things are not going to work out the way that we always expect. And when that adversity strikes, when those challenges happen, we need to go in with this attitude of flexibility, that I'm here to serve others. I'll go with the flow. I'll make sure that I do what I'm supposed to do. And if something we plan doesn't work, that means God's working something else out. He's in charge. He's the one that knows how it's all going to come together. We need to follow, serve, love, and be ready to roll with the punches. So we have 6 principles. And if we can have these ideals, if we can have these attitudes as we go on the mission field, I think we're going to be great. Understand the commitment to teamwork and ministry. Ministry is a byproduct of your Christian life. We need to maximize God's glory over maximizing our own gifts. We need to see the world as God sees it. Let's be spiritually prepared and take Jesus with us. And let's make sure we're ready to embrace adversity. And I think we're going to be setting ourselves up to not only have great impact, but to have the best true experience in the mission field as we possibly can.